standing 7 feet tall with a 10-foot wingspan, the red-eyed glowing creature who marks doom for mortal man will forever be remembered as the cryptid with the best gyatt. His name? Mothman. Roll intro. This man is like a UFO. I don't know what a shite poke is. Batman's on my neighbor's roof. Bad parent moment. He just got the zooming. Insane, but go off. They saw him before all these crazy things. Between November of 1966 and December of 1967, over 100 eyewitness accounts were reported to the police and authorities. That's wild. All right, and we're just gonna dive right into the first account of Mothman. So set the stage. It's November 15th, 1966. There's two couples riding in a car together. Now, you have Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet, okay? And they're driving in a car, and they're driving out in what's called the TNT area, which I'll get more into later, but they're driving out in the TNT area, and they park their car, and they get out of the car, and they're just standing there, and then the two girls look over and they see something and they're like, yo, what's that? And it's Mothman. He's just standing there just 50 feet away, and he slowly starts walking towards them. And at first they're like, oh my gosh. And then the panic sets in because they realize it's not just some other dude out there chilling. It's a freaking monster. So they hop back in their car, and Mothman is kind of running at them at this point, but they say that he like was really bad at walking and running. Like he kind of hobbled or something. Like he wasn't a good runner, okay? Mothman couldn't go in the Olympics for the 500 meter dash, right? So they hop in their car, they whip the car around, they start trying to drive away, and Mothman lifts off. Mothman just lifts off, and he's flying after the car, and they get to this straightaway, and they start driving at 95 to 100 miles per hour, and they say that Mothman is flying right behind him over the car without flapping his wings. What is Mothman's accelerant? This man is like a UFO. There is no signs of any sort of propellant. He's just going. I don't know if he's like magically riding the wind current that a car makes, because I know cars make huge wind currents that they displace air. We don't notice, we're inside the cars, but they really do. Like if you ever rode a motorcycle, you can get like really bad wind currents if you're going behind like semis and stuff. So I don't know if he's like riding the wind current or what, but Mothman straight up is just flying. And eventually when they get close to town, they just say he just like stops and goes. And the four of them are freaking out, right? But they decide, no. We have to make sure what we saw was what we saw before we go tell authorities. So they just turn around and they go back, and they claim to have seen Mothman again, just back at the TNT area. They see him again, and they're like, okay, no, he's there. So then they go and they just go to the police department to report this. And they were like good acquaintances with the officer they show up to. And they all tell the officer what happens, and the officer, he believes them. And not only does believe them, he goes, they weren't drunk, they had no symptoms of that, they weren't on anything. He's like, these are the most sober, serious people telling me this story that they could possibly be. And like, he knows them, they're good acquaintances, it's a small town. So like, you can trust him when he believes it, and he goes, they weren't high, they weren't drunk, they weren't under any influence at all. And he believes them. So they tell the town about this in the morning, and the town just freaks out. It's so wild. Now to get more into the TNT area, what the TNT area is, the government during World War II made this massive, I think it was like 4,000 acres or 4,000 square miles. I don't remember which one it is. I didn't write that down. Cut me some slack. But anyway, this massive explosion plant, and they also dumped like a bunch of toxic waste there. And then they abandoned it after World War II, and the government took it over as like a nature preserve, but it's from then till today, it's still like a disaster cleanup zone. Like there's still toxic waste there, but you know, people love to go hang out there. There's lots of cool concrete structures. If you watch documentaries about Point Pleasant, you can see lots of video footage of all these structures in the TNT area. It's massive. It just goes for miles, right? One of the testaments from the couples was that there's all these igloos and buildings in this plant there, and all of them had like other birds and wildlife living in it, except for one. There was just one building that nothing else went to, and they're like, maybe that's Mothman's house. So that's another account from their account that night. But there's so many other crazy accounts. I'm just gonna touch a few of them. There was 2 volunteer firefighters who were like help directing traffic the next day, because there's literally the town freaks out, right? The town freaks out. Hundreds of people grab their guns, get in their cars, and go out to drive out there the next night because they want to just shoot whatever it is. They're like, there's a monster in our woods, we gotta go kill that thing, right? So there's 2 firemen who are just out there and they're just trying to like direct traffic and, you know, just make sure everybody's safe. The 2 of them said that they saw this giant bird with just massive red eyes, right? Massive red eyes, right? So there's this other guy named Newell Partridge. This guy claims that he was having all sorts of weird stuff happening in his house, and his dog disappeared, and that kind of gets into the weeds, but it's either aliens stole his dog or Mothman ate his dog. Those are the 2 options presented, because they never found the dog or the body of the dog. It's a huge dog, right? The dog was a massive German Shepherd. So he's just like, it wasn't like a coyote that got my dog. He's like, either Mothman ate my dog or aliens stole my dog. So that's another weird one. But during this time, like, everyone in the local town is like freaking out, and they're going and they're trying to hunt down the thing. It gets so bad that there's a reserve nearby, and the reserve like deploys troops, and they just start telling people, okay, stop going out here, just like go home, stop trying to hunt this thing. And the mayor, he's just like, I think it's a giant heron, like the bird, and he called it the shite poke. I don't know what a shite poke is, but take that with a grain of salt. So there's one person, and they saw Mothman during the day, and they said that he was like a giant prehistoric dinosaur bird. That's one of the eyewitness testimonies. So maybe we're getting this all wrong. Maybe Mothman isn't a moth. Maybe Mothman is a pterodactyl, which I don't know which would be cooler, because I love pterodactyls, but I think him being Mothman is more likely. You know what I'm saying? There's another account of this woman, and her name was Marcella Bennett, okay? So she gets in the car with her daughter, who some accounts say 2-3 years old, and some other people. She drives out to visit some friends that are kind of lived near the TNT area. Some accounts say that she went out there to like try to spook them or mess with them, or some other accounts just say they were going to hang out with friends. So they're going to leave, right? And she's carrying her daughter back out to the car, and she says she turns and she sees Mothman, and he's just standing there. Like, he's just vibing. Like, just imagine you're walking out to your car in this dark wooded area. You look over, there's this 7-foot tall, giant winged, red beady-eyed creature just chilling. So she panics, she freaks out, and she says she turns to run back to the house, and straight up like trips and falls and just like drops her child, like her 2-year-old child. And then she said she not only dropped her child, but she fell on top of her child. Her child starts crying, and then they're like screaming from the house because they were like watching her walk out. They see Mothman, they're like screaming, get back inside, get back inside. She scoops up her kid who she dropped. Like, bad parent moment. Am I right? You don't want to drop your child when you see a cryptid. Like, that's pretty bad, right? Anyway, so she like books it for the door, and some accounts say that she gets in the door, they slam the door shut, and then they hear Mothman slam into the door like he was trying to just like come inside with them. And they're like, he didn't seem malicious, they were just terrified. But like, according to their account, Mothman was like, wait, guys, I want to come in and hang out. Then like Mothman just like stood and like kind of peered through the window for a few minutes and was like, you're not gonna let me in? But they're like, he wasn't necessarily acting aggressive. Apparently they were all panicked. She kind of fainted and passed out, dragged her to the couch. There's like 4 or 5 accounts of this story that I've watched. All the information is like jarbled. There's like 5 different versions of this story. They never clarify if the kid's okay, because she drops like a 2-year-old child while carrying them on a gravel road, falls on top of it, scoops it back up, and jumps inside a house. And there's like no mention if the kid's okay. So it's like, I hope the kid's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, you would hope the kid's okay. I don't know if the kid's okay. I hope so. So that's one of the really wild stories, right? There's other reports of this people like driving down the Ohio River, like seeing Mothman like fly over the river. So that's pretty cool. In April 1967, a guy says that he saw a large black figure rise from the woods while he's driving on the interstate by the Ohio River, start flying over his car, and he matches the speed at 75 miles an hour. Apparently, Mothman, he just got the zoomies. You know, he's just like a little puppy or a little kitty, you know, like chasing down cars, right? Your dog gets loose, he chases down cars, which we'll get into that theory that I have later, right? Time to crack open a Cryptsy, like a cryptid Pepsi. That was a really bad joke, I just thought of it. There's another account in November of 1967, so this is about a full year after Mothman appears, right? 4 men are hunting in Cornstalk Wildlife Management Area, which is what they call that, like wildlife reservation that took over the TNT area, right? And they saw that they said a giant gray figure with giant red eyes, and the men were so frightened that they didn't even think to shoot. So that you have 4 guys, they're hunting, they all have guns. Mothman is so terrifying that they're too afraid to shoot at it. They just run away, get in their cars, and drive straight to the police and go, "We saw Mothman." Which, like, considering the fact that, like, a year earlier, people were, like, hopping in their cars and driving out there going, like, "We're gonna hunt Mothman. We're gonna shoot Mothman." And then there's hunters actually out there who see Mothman while holding guns, and they're just so scared of Mothman. They just can't even shoot it. They're just terrified. Which I kind of love that. There actually are some accounts of a Mothman-like creature in the area well before 1966. Most of them are talked about in this book called Haunted Valley and More Folktales of Appalachia, and it's written by James Gay Jones. Good on you, James. So he said that at some point there was a 12-foot wingspan creature spotted in Point Pleasant in the early 1900s and a couple times after the Second World War. And there was a number of accounts of people getting chased by the Birdman along the entirety of the Ohio River, which the Ohio River is huge. But I can't recommend going to Ohio to see it. Bad idea. There's also this account in November 21st of 1966 where a man named Richard West saw Batman sitting on top of his neighbor's roof. Yeah, he's just like, Batman is on top of my neighbor's house, and he goes to the police. He calls the police, and he imagine being this guy during the Mothman craze, calls up the police and goes, "Batman's on my neighbor's roof." Like, he had just been reading Batman comics, and he looks outside, and Mothman was apparently on his neighbor's roof, and he just calls the cops and says, "Batman's on my neighbor's house." The craze that the police were dealing with at the time must have been so wild. And then to just get that call, like, if I was a police officer, I probably would have laughed at the guy. I probably would have gone and investigated, but I probably would have laughed. But this guy described it as a 6-foot tall winged humanoid with large, striking red eyes, and its wingspan reached 8 feet. And when taking flight, the creature lifted off vertically without flapping. So again, we have Mothman, who just, he's anti-gravity, okay? Mothman is anti-gravity, right? There's another story where 2 sisters were walking home from the store when they saw Mothman standing next to a junkyard, right? And they're terrified. So they take off running as fast as they possibly can with their groceries, like just full blast towards their house. And their account is Mothman took flight, swooped over them, and as he swooped over them, kind of like brushed their hair, and then just flew off. Does that sound like a predator to you? Or does that sound like just a sweet little guy trying to make friends? I feel like Mothman just wanted some friends. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like Mothman just wanted some friends. One of the wildest stories about Mothman, though, and probably my favorite, was there's this girl, her name is Faye Laporte, and her brother, who's driving the car. And then they have, I think it's either their siblings or their friends are in the backseat. I don't remember exactly what. They're driving. They see Mothman flying beside the car. They panic and slam on the brakes, right? Most people, they've just been speeding up faster and faster and faster, and Mothman like just flies and keeps pace with the car. Like, we have accounts of him flying 100 miles an hour without flapping his wings, which insane, but go off. They slam on the brakes, and they say that Mothman swoops around and lands on the hood of their car, kind of crouches down and just stares at them through the windshield. And they're just like frozen. They're just like, and he's just on the hood of the car staring at them. And they're just like paralyzed in fear. And the dude who's driving the car, the brother, is like, yells at his kids in the back, like, get down, get down. So they like duck. And Mothman, and they're just having like a little sweet little staring contest. And the Mothman just leaves. Does this sound like a threat, or does this sound like a lost puppy trying to make friends? Because I feel like Mothman just kind of has lost puppy vibes. But also imagine like a 7 foot tall Mothman laying on top of your car, and he just kind of goes, what you doing? What you doing there? What you doing in there? What the heck? I love Mothman. I love Mothman, okay? And they reported that he had just the reddest eyes you've ever seen in your life. They immediately reported that incident. They just straight to the police station and immediately reporting it to the Pleasant Point Police, which I will now like to refer to as the PPP. The PPP, the Pleasant Point Police, the PPP, okay? The PP. There's also accounts that the two of them later tried to go to like the TNT area to see if they could see Mothman again. But at this point, not only is the military there, they also claimed that there was men in black suits there in the TNT area, just telling people to leave and go home, that it's dangerous. They don't want anybody killed. There's still toxic biohazardous waste that hasn't been cleaned up. And they're just kind of like, go home. So at this point, they're kind of shutting things down, but this made the residents go like, something's going on. The fact that there was like such a presence, which more than likely there was just such a strong presence, because like I said earlier, there was hundreds of people going out trying to shoot Mothman. But the presence of the military and these like men in black like just made the townsfolk assume that Mothman was real and like something crazy's going on, which is really weird and interesting. The next two things we need to talk about, there's two really important people. So you have Jonathan Keel, and then we have Mary Hyre. So Jonathan Keel, he wrote the book The Mothman Prophecies, which is the biggest book about Mothman and inspired most of the Mothman movies. Just a big thing. So you have him, right? And then you have Mary Hyre, which was just the local news reporter. She was a reporter for Athens Messenger, and she lived there in Point Pleasant, and she had an article column called Where the Two Rivers Meet. So it's the Kanawha and the Ohio River, which I just feel like is adorable. Anyways, in her personal notes, she writes that she was seeing UFOs and strange sightings on a nightly basis. So there's also this huge UFO thing going on at the same time as Mothman. And she's also getting calls almost on the daily of citizens just calling her and saying, hey, I saw Mothman. Hey, this weird thing's going on. All this stuff, right? And the two of them are the main two sources for most everything we know about Mothman, and the sightings and the accounts and all that stuff. We know because of the two of these. But what gets really weird is many people started reporting that the men in black started like hanging around her office, stalking her, following around town. There's reports that they left her voice calls. They would write and leave notes for her, just harassing her, telling her like, stop reporting on the Mothman, which I don't think there's any photographic evidence of these men in black ever being in Point Plaza, ever harassing Mary Hyre or any of the other townsfolk, but there's a lot of reports of the men in black there, and this is a pretty early occurrence of men in black sightings. So the culmination of Mothman and his stint of terror on Point Pleasant kind of ends December 15th, 1967, when the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant collapses and tragically 46 people died. There's a whole lot of people who say that they saw Mothman around the bridge in the days leading up, or even there's some accounts that people who were on the bridge when it collapsed and survived saw Mothman on the bridge or flying over the bridge as it collapsed. But the actual scientific reason that the bridge collapsed is there's this thing called an eye bar as part of the suspension of the bridge, and it was cracked, and then it ended up just breaking because traffic was backed up and the bridge was just completely full of really heavy vehicles. And this bridge was designed for like horse and buggy times, and they were just still using it when like semis now exist and trucks exist, right? Yeah, not the best. Like, it would just couldn't handle the weight, right? But there are two things that people know about this incident when they say it's a bad omen, like this was destined to happen. The first is it's exactly 13 months to the day of the first Mothman sighting that the bridge collapses, and there's that spooky number 13 showing up there. But that's not the only one. Part of the bridge that snapped that caused the bridge to collapse was the 13th one along the bridge. So there's two spooky instances of the number 13 showing up in the bridge's collapse. That just really led people to believe that Mothman is just this bad omen figure, right? And it's this reputation of him showing up and being this omen of doom, of catastrophe, of terror that leads into people speculating or claiming they saw him before all these crazy things, including a 1999 Russian apartment bombing, the collapse of the Freiburg mine, Chernobyl, Japanese Fukushima nuclear disaster and earthquakes, and 9/11. 9/11, okay? And just all these reports have just contributed that he's not only the omen of doom and disaster, but yes, he also maybe eats dogs. So the mine incidents, basically, there's a group of miners that were heading into the mine to work. At the entrance of the mine, there is just Mothman. He's just right there, and they're all terrified, and they all run away from the mine. And it said that minutes later, it collapsed. And they describe Mothman as tall, huge wings, who didn't really have a head, but his head was kind of set down in between his shoulders, and he had giant red eyes, which is such a weird description, but really fits the Mothman description. Another account is that in 1985, scientists, workers, and citizens who lived near the power plant of Chernobyl claimed that they saw a terrifying giant flying creature with red eyes. He was seen before the explosion at Chernobyl. So did Mothman cause the Chernobyl nuclear disaster and the death of more than 100,000 Russians, both immediately and long-term, from cancer? Maybe? Sorry, I said Russians. Chernobyl happened in Ukraine, but at that point, it was all part of the Soviet Union. Technically, it was Ukraine people that died, right? Apparently, before 9/11, several people said that they saw a giant, strange flying creature flying around the Twin Towers, and people who saw the attack, the day of the attack, said that they saw the same creature flying parallel to the second plane as it hit the tower. If I had to guess, it was probably just shadows of the planes, okay? Hear me out. It was probably just shadows of airplanes. I really don't think Mothman just came to New York and just circled the Twin Towers 7 times and they fell down. That seems pretty far-fetched. Another report is the collapse of the I-35 bridge, June 2007. Reports of Mothman began surfacing in Minnesota. The reports were concentrated in Minneapolis surrounding the I-35 bridge itself. A month after these sightings, the bridge collapsed on August 1st, 2007. The collapse was devastating. It killed 13 people and injured 145 other people. I think why people were so keen to like associate Mothman with this was it's another bridge collapse where a lot of people died, and they're like, Mothman is the harbinger of bridge collapse. So I think it just probably was people in a state of shock. They're trying to rationalize this tragic event that happened near them. They remember reading in the paper there was a Mothman and then a bridge collapse. Maybe I saw a Mothman. Maybe that's why my bridge collapsed. If I had to guess, it's probably some of that going on. Maybe not. I don't know. I really don't know. But I've got a gut feeling there might have been some of that going on, right? There's some accounts that say people saw Mothman in Mexico before the swine flu outbreak. I'm not going to go into that one, but it's really funny. Apparently, Mothman wanted some authentic tacos and tortas and caused the swine flu. Yeah, that one's hard to believe. There's reports of him chasing people through the streets of Mexico. Pretty wild on that one. So the final account of people seeing Mothman before a disaster is Fukushima. There are 2 witnesses who were out near Japan's Fukushima power plant in March 2011 when they heard a loud screech. They turned back to see a creature sitting on top of the Fukushima power plant. It unfurled its giant wings and flew towards them. They were horrified by the pair of red glowing eyes that looked at them, but then the creature disappeared. Shortly after, Fukushima happened. Mothman weep confirmed. I just want to know, is Mothman a Sasuke guy or a Naruto guy? I'm kind of partial to Naruto, but I get the Sasuke appeal. So you may be asking, there's all these accounts of Mothman. Are there any explanations as to what Mothman is, or why he's there? Or if he isn't real, what could people have mistaken him as? Well, there's quite a few theories, and we're gonna start with the wildest theory, okay? Some residents of Point Pleasant claim that Mothman was a curse from the Native American chief Cornstalk, who cursed the land of Point Pleasant for 200 years in 1777. Apparently in 1777, in November, Chief Cornstalk traveled to try to make peace talks with some settlers, some colonizers who were in a fort. It didn't go well. They imprisoned him. His son shows up and says, "Where's my dad?" They imprison the son as well. Then a scuffle breaks out between some people from his tribe and the people from the fort. 2 of the people from the forts died, and they just murder him in cold blood. And his son, and every other prisoner they were holding captive. When they tried to kill him, he didn't die right away, so as he's laying on the ground, apparently he uttered this curse word for word. "I was the borderman's friend. Many times I have saved him and his people from harm. I have never warred with you, but only to protect our wigwams and lands. I refused to join your pale-faced enemies with the redcoats. I came to the fort as your friend, and you murdered me. You have murdered by my side my young son. For this, may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this land. May it be blighted by nature. May it even be blighted in its hopes. May the strength of its peoples be paralyzed by the stain of our blood." So some people believe that his curse manifests as Mothman, and paralyzed by the stain of our blood represents Mothman's giant red eyes that so many people are paralyzed in fear when they see. This is a really interesting account. Apparently, most of the information from this account comes from a play that people wrote about this happening, and they found a copy of the play in like World War I times, and were like, this is really weird. And then they looked into it, and yes, that chief was real, and he really did die. Whether the play included an actual word-for-word quote of what he said upon his death, nobody knows. But that quote was wrote way before Mothman was alive, and yeah, almost 200 years later, this creature terrorizes the city, and a whole bunch of people end up dead. So is the Mothman the fulfillment of this curse? Maybe? And you might be saying, all right, that sounds fantastical. Is there a more rational explanation for what Mothman was? Well, wildlife biologist Robert L. Smith from West Virginia University told reporters that the sightings fit the sandhill crane, America's largest crane, which is almost as tall as a man, has a 7-foot wingspan, and has red coloring around its eyes. Other people said that it was more likely that witnesses were seeing the great blue heron. I'm gonna throw up pictures of those. I didn't look at what those look like beforehand. I should do that right now. Sandhill crane. I mean, I guess the sandhill crane does have pretty big wings, and it does kind of have red and the feathers around its eye, but there's no way I would see the sandhill crane and go, Mothman. First of all, Mothman has no neck. The sandhill crane has neck for days. The next one, we had the great blue heron. So other people say it's the great blue heron. Looking at the great blue heron, there's no way that I would see this bird and go, that's Mothman. He does have very large gray wings, which everyone says Mothman has these giant gray wings, right? But most of the account of Mothman's wings were that they were more like a bat's wings, or they weren't just like feathery wings. They were like solid wings, Like, many people describe Mothman's wings as like the wings of an angel, which kind of sounds cool, not gonna lie. If I had gray, black angel wings, that'd be sick. Other people claim that he was not Mothman, but he was one of the infamous Thunderbirds, which is another kind of cryptid folkloric bird creature, which I'm not going to get into right now because I'll do a video about that someday. Another guy whose last name is Nickel and first name I didn't write down claimed at the time that it was just barred owls. They're like, hey, it's just a kind of abnormally large owl and you all are just making a stink of it, and it's just an owl, like it's just a regular owl. But tell me this, can an owl fly 100 miles an hour without flapping its wings? I don't think so. Okay, you look at me right now and you tell me that a regular old owl flies 100 miles an hour. You can't. It's because Mothman is real, confirmed. There's some people who suggested or proposed that Mothman is some sort of mutant from all the waste and pollutants and runoff from the TNT area and waste disposal, and it also infested the city's aquifer. So there's some people who say he's a mutant because of that. Then there's other people who say the entire water supply of the area was contaminated by all these chemicals, and everyone is collectively hallucinating from toxic government wastewater. So imagine just like an entire town, thousands of people, just a shared hallucination, and the shared hallucination from their poisonous water is Mothman. I have a hard time buying that one, but I mean, if I were to hallucinate, I would probably hallucinate a cryptid that's cool as hell too. Jeff Wemsley, who is the owner of the Mothman Museum, which you can visit year-round, and also has the largest collection of things about Mothman, both historically and not. He believes that Point Pleasant might be a special place on Earth where people can receive premonitions of disasters, or maybe even some sort of portal space, like interdimensionally. He believes that you can have visions, you can have dreams, and you can see the future by communing with Mothman and his gorgeous gyatt. He also is a big proponent of the UFOs we're visiting this time and watching over Point Pleasant during the entirety of the Mothman sightings. There's also a Mothman app and a Mothman festival. And there's also the Mothman statue, which was created by our guy, Bob Roach. Shout out to Roach for creating the best cryptid gyatt in history. But there is one more thing I want to get into in this video before I call it, and it kind of has to do with the UFOs and what my personal theory about Mothman is. So there was actually dozens of documented reports of UFO sightings during the exact same year that people saw Mothman, right? And there's one which is one of the most iconic UFO stories of all time, and it is by a man named Woodrow Derenberger. What a great name, right? So Woodrow Derenberger, he's driving from Point Pleasant back to his home, which is in Mineral Wells, West Virginia, when he's cut off by what he thought at first was a car, but then turns out to be a spaceship that forces him off the road and makes him pull over. A figure exits the craft, walks up to him, and starts talking to him without moving his mouth, and the creature is just creepily smiling the whole time. And it's partway through this conversation that he realizes this creature is not only not human, but it's talking to me through telepathy. The creature tells him his name is Indrid Cold, or I've also seen Indris Cold. But anyway, Indrid Cold, who has now been dubbed the Grinning Man. But he told Woodrow that he meant him no harm. He talked about some things that were going to happen in the near future. Chit-chatted. He didn't specify everything the alien said, which to me is wild. But what's even crazier is that when he reported it, there were several eyewitnesses who came forward to the police after his report went public saying, I was driving down the interstate the other night and I saw Woodrow with his car parked talking to the strangest man I ever seen, who has the strangest car I've ever seen. And so basically, there was a whole bunch of people who said they drove by him and saw him talking to some humanoid looking thing on the side of the road, and one of the cars looked really funny. But this gets me to my personal favorite theory of what Mothman is. I believe that Mothman is the lost pet of aliens. Hear me out, okay? You have Mothman. He is just randomly appears out of nowhere in this town. The exact same time, UFOs started appearing just out of nowhere. It gets to the point where the UFO people are even trying to commune with residents in the local area, and we don't know why. Hey, don't claw that. It seems like Mothman is just scavenging for food, apparently maybe eating some guy's dog, as well as other creatures near this power plant, right? But he's not attacking the humans, but he is trying to get close to the humans, but he never harms any people at all whatsoever, even though he had plenty of opportunities to probably harm several people, including like the girls who were running down the street and he just kind of flew over them and brushed by them. Or, you know, several instances of reports of him just kind of like staring into homes and sitting outside people's doors, kind of like a lost puppy. And there's all these alien sightings, and then suddenly he's just gone forever and nobody ever sees him again around Point Pleasant. I kind of like to believe that aliens or interdimensional beings like lost their pet and he was just kind of bumming around Point Pleasant for a while, and then they eventually found him and brought him home. That's kind of what I like to believe. I know that's a bit silly, but anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and supporting me. Whoever you support me, I love you. Bye! Always remember to stay spooky, and I'll see you in the next one.